Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you lovely folks joining me here nice and early over at Marvel Snap Zone. Welcome back for yet another highlight segment, this time designed to show you some of our early thoughts on decks that can be used once you've gained access to cards from Series 5. So if you aren't familiar, we've got a lot of exciting news on the way. Big announcement just last week about how a patch is on the way before the start of the next season pass that will bring us 2 new series worth of cards and that ever asked for token shop for you guys that are looking to buy cards with collector's tokens as well. So it's been fun for us to start exploring what decks might look like when we want to use those cards from Series 4 and Series 5. If you're looking for Series 4 decks, the video went live yesterday. You can go and find it on our YouTube channel already, or hopefully I can annotate it somewhere up above if I'm lucky. But today we're going to be taking a look at some of the decks that we've put together for Series 5 ultra rare cards. Having already dug into Series 4 and honestly being very excited about the possibilities several of them have, today we're digging into the big ones, the potential game winners, the ultra rare Series 5 cards. There are only 6 cards in this series, but they all look to be super impactful in their own sense. Of course, Galactus and Thanos are the superstars of the bunch, already being on many players' wish lists for months because you've been able to generate them with Agent 13 and similar effects. Super Skrull, I should say, is looking like a superstar in the making, while Valkyrie, Bast, and Shuri all seem very playable in at least one or more archetypes in the current meta game. Looking forward to exploring all this with you. First of all, happy Thanksgiving to those folks who are celebrating that. Hopefully you're having a lovely holiday period. If you're not familiar with the effects of any of these cards, they are available in the description box down below in the article. It's kind of hard to make it look aesthetically pleasing on screen. We're just going to be showing off some deck lists in the video. So if you're not sure what any of these do, go check it out, give the article a click, and you can find it down there at your earliest convenience. Last but not least, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel over here. It would be lovely to see you for more Marvel Snap content in the near future. We are currently making at least one video each and every day, so hopefully you keep enjoying the content as you have been so far. Cool, so on to our first card of this bunch. We're starting with one of the big bads, Galactus. Galactus is going to do a lot of things, but our first shell here, arguably making On Reveal significantly more fun. The big downside of an On Reveal synergy is how predictable a card can often be, and how much of a tell Wong often is for your opponent. We're seeing in the current metagame, with Cosmo being a popular inclusion, that you can definitely ruin those On Reveal strategies regularly. However, that archetype might not have a way to play around that thanks to Galactus. The concept here is really quite simple. Step 1. Try and play Galactus on an empty location before turn 5, thanks to a card like Electro, Wave, or Psylocke. They should have the reveal priority heading into the next turn as a result, because you should be the only person with a card in play once Galactus is at that location. Or step 2, you can play Leader on that location afterwards, and even if your opponent tries to play Cosmo, you'll still get to copy their cards because you have reveal priority. So you should be able to win that one and only location by setting that up. Another pattern with Galactus that also sounds like it could be quite fun, if you can play Wong on turn 4 into Wave plus Psylocke on the same Wong location on turn 5, you should then have 8 energy on turn 6 with all your cards costing 4, meaning you should be able to play Magneto to clear a lane from your opponent they thought they had won, and then play Galactus onto that lane that you've just cleared in order to trigger Galactus there alone. You can also have a similar play pattern with a card like Aero if the empty location already exists. You simply play Aero onto a lane to make sure the opponent won't play any cards into the lane you intend to play Galactus. So this list here you see, this on reveal list, is where we would start. However, we think there are tons of ways to work around Galactus, especially once we've found a way to play him earlier than the expected turn 6. There are other ways to build around the card outside of an on reveal synergy. For example, one could simply play Galactus in a Destroyer shell with Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, which is a deck that we have coming up for you next. This way, we can play Galactus into a lane where we've managed to reduce our opponent's power by 11 already, meaning they are very unlikely to try and compete there off the back of Green Goblin and Hobgoblin. Makes this one pretty interesting. Obviously, Destroyer, a fairly well-established archetype already, so not all that surprising to see this kind of being the framework for Galactus, but we think it makes a really interesting endgame choice over a card like Spectrum, allowing you to have those Destroy synergies baked into your deck once again that the ongoing versions have for a while foregone. Up next, well, possibly the most scary updated archetype with all these Series 5 cards. Mr. Negative becomes somewhat terrifying because almost every card in Series 5 seems to have a helping of synergy in some way, but This is the archetype they all kind of benefit the most, Mr. Negative, with a lot of cards having a higher cost than their respective power. Galactus being played earlier than turn 6 is incredible, we've already established this, and Mr. Negative is another way for us to do that. Also, it becomes more, well, much more reasonable, honestly, to think that we could win a lane with a 6-power Galactus than a 3-power one. However, there are two other cards that become bonkers when they have their power and cost reversed, and these are Super Skrull and Shuri. Super Skrull honestly looks like a future nerfed card to a lot of us, being able to annoy the whole ongoing synergy so much it appears to be too good, arguably, for a single card. We're looking to see how that one plays out over time, as it does seem to be a little bit scary. As for Shuri, the card isn't quite as shiny as something like Super Skrull, but almost every card in this deck becomes stupidly strong if their power is doubled when they've already been negatived. Galactus is especially the one card that comes to mind, as it basically becomes able to rival Hulk in terms of power, while still doing everything you want it to do. Valkyrie is actually another card we were looking at in this deck. It's kind of an interesting thought process, as most costs would benefit her if they haven't been negatived, because you get to increase all these powers up to 3. Also, Valkyrie setting all of the cards to 3 power means something like Angela or Iron Man could represent potential lane winners, as they would grow our overall power after her ability. Back in September, when Mr. Negative received his second nerf and became a -1 power card, many were afraid the archetype would die as a result of that, and understandably it kind of did. It might take a while for it to come back, considering the cost and randomness of each of these Series 5 cards to obtain, but this might be the most overall improved archetype. It's very, very exciting stuff all around. Okay, up next we have a list based on Valkyrie and Bast. These are two cards that are going to dramatically reward you for playing Swarm-style strategies. I'm sure these cards will be able to push other archetypes as well, but for a start, both seem pretty well indicated in a deck looking to swarm with lots of small units. Both Bast and Valkyrie in the deck, you can manipulate power in your hand and on your field to surprise your opponent in many, many ways. With many cards that either grow, like Ant-Man or Mojo, or buff other cards like Kazar, Blue Marvel and Captain America, our unit shouldn't end up at all 3 power at the end of a game. Another way to use this duo is actually our next upcoming deck that we're kind of excited to share as well. Maybe a little more unique than this Kazar Zoo style shell you see for them here, and that is going to be the Cerebro version of this deck. The signature card when it comes to having all of your units have the same power cost. Unsurprisingly, thanks to Bast and Valkyrie, we should be able to include cards like Mr. Sinister and Brood into this deck, increasing the potential amount of power on our board to buff at the end of a game. Until now, Cerebro 3 has been having a difficult time working out properly, usually having to rely on something like Multiple Man to get enough targets to buff over the course of a game. However, this new take on the archetype, thanks to Bast and Valkyrie, lets you know that you can do all kinds of really powerful shenanigans with other cards that might not naturally have 3 power, and we already know how much damage Armor, Cosmo and Killmonger can do in a metagame revolving around synergies like the ones that we see all too commonly right now. This deck is very exciting to me, very cool to see new ways to abuse Cerebro, and I'll be giving this one a shake myself when I get access to both Bast and Valkyrie. Alrighty, so the big cheese, I suppose, coming up in a couple of decks next. Thanos. Thanos is a card that is extremely interesting. It has so much depth, it's hard to understand exactly what we are supposed to do with it. It arguably has infinite possibilities, which is a somewhat fun way of thinking about it. If Galactus offers a lot of possibilities as how to exploit it, Thanos as well is a card that can fit into virtually any deck, arguably, because the Infinity Stones are so flexible, it's kind of hard to figure out where they wouldn't be strong enough to contribute in some way. However, we tried to exclude decks that were reliant on drawing specific cards when we were looking at how to build around Thanos as your win condition. After all, as strong as they are, the stones are going to dilute your deck and make drawing your wonky card a rarer occurrence. That being said, there is a nice little list in the article of cards that we think could work well with the Infinity Stones. This includes things like Lockjaw, Kazar, Ant-Man, Quinjet, things like Carnage, Bast and Valkyrie, Angela and Bishop. So if you're interested in the full list of things that we think might work well with the stones, you can go and check that out in the article. But with that said, here are a couple of decks that we think are a good starting point for Thanos and the stones, as there are a lot of cards that can make good use of them. Bounce seems like a pretty natural home for a card like Thanos. It should synergize very well with the stones. Angela, Bishop, Falcon, Beast, Quinjet, are all often staples of this archetype in some capacity. We can also add Bast, which we think is possibly a pretty good fit into this deck as well. Additionally, Carnage is a way to help clear out your side of the board, as we might have a lot of cheap cards in play and not enough space to play them all. So looking at a version of Bounce here with Bast and Thanos seems like a pretty good way to be able to reuse those stones, grow stuff while we're doing so, maybe even grow a collector while doing so, and then remove them from the board if and when required. It's a pretty sweet one all around. Another archetype, however, that benefits from the Thanos is Deathpool, which seems exceptionally flavorful, for the simple reason the stones are all one-cost cards with powerful on-reveals, making them easy to gain value from and then remove with Killmonger to reduce Death's cost by a lot. So you can see that we've gone with a very stereotypical Death-style shell here. We also like the synergy that comes with Moon Girl in a deck based on Thanos, because duplicating strong effects like the Soul Stone or the Time Stone seems like a potentially very powerful thing to be doing alongside this stereotypical Death Wave strategy. So good chance Thanos belongs here, which from a flavor perspective also seems very, very fantastic. Honestly, I feel like all of the Series 5 cards, even though there are only 6 of them, could help push a dozen decks to be better versions of themselves. As such, even if we try to showcase all the ideas we find the most promising here, I'm sure there are genius decks out there that we haven't thought of, or are in the works of some players' Discord or players' minds. Honestly, I can't wait for these cards to be here to try out these ideas and be amazed by what everyone manages to create themselves around this pool of new cards. If Series 4 admittedly had some cards that we weren't so hyped about, like Orca, all 6 editions from Series 5 seem super solid and potentially game-defining once enough players get their hands on them. They totally make up for the relatively slow increase in content over the last few months, as the focus was, of course, global release. As normal, we welcome all feedback on this article and this style of video, either in the comments section down below, in our community Discord server. If you want to join the conversation with thousands of other Marvel Snap players, you can go give that a click as well. Alternatively, just at us on Twitter at Marvel Snap Zone and let us know what you think. If you want to catch me for some live content on the YouTube channel tonight, I'm back here in just a few hours from now, jamming some Marvel Snap live on YouTube and having a good time with the community, so feel free to come and hang out at about 6:30 GMT in the evening if you prefer. Last but not least, one final time, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. It would be lovely to see you for more Snap content here in the near future. Until next time, I have been HowlingMines, you have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care, have a good one.